Good morning and welcome to Rise and Shine Sundays. I'm your host, Jamie Rich, and I'm really delighted to have you with us today. We gather every Sunday morning at this time to have a discussion around a topic that is built around a question of inquiry. One of the things that we believe strongly here on Rise and Shine Sundays is that we want to make sure that you're involved in this conversation. We want to make sure that your input is in the chat and that we can incorporate those conversations. This particular episode of Rise and Shine Sundays is actually something new for us. This is an opportunity for us to continue a conversation. We have been building a series of conversations around these central questions. But this particular week, we're going to be looking at something that built from a discussion that we had last week. And in fact, this week, we're talking about what does it take to recover after harm? We talked last week about a number of things about recognizing violations in real time, that sometimes when we're working through our transformative energy, that we encounter some resistance and that we're we're sometimes not aware of all of the harm that may be coming our way as we're moving through things. So we talked about how to recognize harm last time. And this week, we're talking about the practical work about what comes next. That self-verified rebuilding that comes from your new awareness in things. And we've got this week something I'm terribly excited about that we've actually been wanting to have happen in our Rise and Shine Sundays. We have, ladies and gentlemen, an honest to God roundtable discussion about a topic. I could just sit here and stare at this assemblage of people for as part of our discussion. So, but with us in the roundtable, why don't I start right up above me? We are welcoming as a new guest into Rise and Shine Sundays, my good friend Stacy. Stacy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, good morning, Jamie Rich. I'm awake on a Sunday. That
Yay.
alone is that alone is an emergence. Good morning, everybody. My name's Stacy Bryoka. I'm also known as the Squirrel Wrangler, and I host Show Me Your Nuts here on the Breakthrough Show Network.
And to our leader from last week in terms of the discussion, Sang D.
Yay. I'm just a girl with a voice changing, having conversations one word at a time.
Well, thank you. And then immediately to the next spot would be Ray.
Hi there. I'm Reikio, and I'm making friends with all these wonderful folks and engaging in conversations that I wouldn't be able to have thanks to Jessica, Jamie, and the crew here.
Isn't that the great thing about the Breakthrough Show Network is it allows different voices to kind of come and emerge around things. And we also have, again, in the discussion this week, our international blend in the roundtable. Ollie, please welcome yourself.
Well, bonjour, bienvenue. I'm the fifth one, so give me five. It's 5 p.m. right now in Belgium, so it's I'm awakened on Sunday also, but it's 5 p.m. And I'm part also of the Refrench Your Brain, Pardon My French, in the Breakthrough Show Network, and it's a blessing to be in this amazing audience with you. And as always, unpack your heart and ask you your question. They are most than welcome in the chat.
Well, thank you. And Ollie will be doing his level best to make sure that we do stay on top of things in the chat. So we have some wonderful guests joining us this morning. And fair warning to everyone who is watching, a lot of what we talk about on Sunday mornings is about that art of self-transformation, right? What's emerging, what's happening. And this particular discussion is going to raise some issues because we're talking about some things what happens when things have gone wrong and what we want to do about rebuilding that trust. So, recovery is very different. It is not linear in terms of the thing. So just like this discussion is kind of emerging, we talked a lot last week saying about how to recognize harm, what it looks like, what happens. And then there's always that decision that comes through about when you're in a journey of self-transformation, when something flips inside your head, and you recognize that, wait, is there a way that I can take back this control? What does my recovery look like? Was there a time in your life, saying, when you were on that journey,
Other than
where,
every day.
yeah, please.
Even after last week's conversation and the experience from last week about the violation of a man with titles, right? A man who presented himself in a certain way, and that breach of trust happened. And when I, as I continue to process through it, like you said, it's not a recipe. There's not like, let's check this box off. Let's check this off. Because here's the thing, harm is going to happen. Hurt's going to happen. It's going to happen. Right. And I think for me, and I was talking about this morning in my book club, is that we want to rush so fast to go, I'm done. I'm over it. I'm done with it. But then you talk about it for like 15 more times, right? You're not done. And that's human. It's human nature,
Right.
because we've become a society where we are performing.
Mhm.
Right? And this morning we were talking about the difference between sympathy and empathy. And sympathy is that state of, I feel for you, and it's a performance space, right? And then that empathy piece is, we feel with them. And knowing that all the things that I've been through personally, I'm able to tap into both of those in such a fascinating way, because I ask you, how do you feel it in your body?
Correct.
How do you feel it in your body? And it comes down to, we think it's coming down to trusting the other person, but it all comes down to, how do you trust yourself? Rebuilding that trust yourself.
Well, and as always saying, you've really invited people to take a look at that particular journey, because when you can say so much in so few words, which is what I really appreciate, because first off, let's be clear about what recovery is not. It's not getting over it quickly, right?
Yeah.
And then it's also recognizing that there's what other people are saying about what your recovery should be, what the self-talk in your head is about what your recovery should be. There's the questioning as to whether or not, is there a different way of looking at this that is helpful? But when it begins to settle in, when you have that embodied cognition, when you have that moment, right, it's not a performance. It is really, you're just moving through it. I see you nodding, Stacy. Does that bring out some stings for you?
That embodied, it's not the embodied performance. And I think it's also that it's when you said when it settles in, I think it's when that integration happens of the learning from the pain or the thing, because recovery could be from something good. To be honest, you could recover from an exciting good thing and bring in, it's when that integration happens, when you've noticed what's happening in your body, you figure out what the message is, you take the lesson and dwell on it or learn from it, and maybe do experiments with it, and then it integrates into who you are next.
Ray, I see you nodding as well. Does that speak to anything?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that it's a learning process, essentially, and Sang's touched on a lot of the elements, and I think it's the learning so that we can change and understand, and I think that's so important.
Right. Well, yeah, please.
And I'm going to tap into the cognitive piece, right? Because Stacy and Ray are talking about the cognitive piece for sure, which is, let's process it up here, right? And I know I tap into, we're trusting that what you felt is real, right? Trusting that your body noticed something for a reason, right? And it's learning that the pain that you have counts, and something happened where it could be someone minimized it, right? And that is painful in itself, right? Because you don't expect people to minimize, especially people that you know and love and trust. And again, going back to rebuilding that trust with yourself, because we think we have to heal, or however you want to, whatever words you choose to use. You don't have to do it on someone else's timeline,
right?
Yeah.
and it makes other people uncomfortable. So uncomfortable. It's like my favorite thing to do is to make people uncomfortable, right? Because, I always talk about people, my favorite F word is, how do you feel?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And they will literally start going into all these things I did today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I go, oh, that's great. I love that. So how do you feel? Right?
But that disconnect saying is what gets off when we've gone through a transformation, and we, just like you said, we're still in our head with it because we're still trying to figure out exactly what we did wrong, where we're going, and there is that cognitive part of it, right? And where the flip begins to happen is when you say, wait a second, this is real. I need to verify in myself what that was, right? And for me, I don't know how anyone else has done in transformation, but I was even thinking of it recently. There's been a big transformation in my personal life. And when I actually have that moment to sometimes just simply breathe in the moment, right? To just sort of say, well, wait a second, it's no longer just happening here in my head. It needs to integrate here, right? And because it is the body that is going to be walking through the rest of this journey with you, right? That integrate. Otherwise, you're going to still be up in that headspace, still trying to check out everything in the world based on the experience that you've been through. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so what we're inviting people to do, the concept of embodied cognition, the idea that it's no longer something that you believe, or you think about, but it's truly, there's that word grok, right?
Mm-hmm.
That people use a lot. It's that really deep embodied cognition. Ali, did you have something you wanted to say about that?
Yes, I truly believe that we can work on our inner self by embarking our body as an ally, because whether we like it or not, we are composed of billions of cells that are forming our body, and our body has its own intelligence, collective and individual intelligence. And so I think, and I'm still learning about that sometimes, it's like rather than to blame my body, I should thank my body for the experience that I'm living. Because if my body has something to say to me, it will, no
Right.
matter what I listen or not.
Right.
So I rather prefer to listen and to course correct rather than to not listen, and then my body will knock more stronger,
Right.
and maybe it's too late. It's
Yeah.
I had a burnout, so it kind of harm in a company, and so my body was able to, but was I listening? That's the true question.
Mm-hmm. Let me just remind you, if you're just joining us on this particular edition of Rise and Shine Sundays, our question that we have in the roundtable and the question that we're presenting to you in the chat is, what does it take to recover after harm? And joining us in the roundtable this morning for this discussion, we're talking a little bit about that idea of moving past the intellectual about all of it, and what does it take to really rebuild that trust with yourself? We've identified the harm, right? And if those of you who are watching this particular episode have some suggestions and ideas in the chat, we're willing to and invite all of that discussion to happen, because as Sang brilliantly said, this is about finding out what works for you. And so we're here to discuss strategies, because there isn't, the Reggio method that we're going to be all acolytes for today. We want to make sure that you realize that this experience was real, and how you want to continue it is up to you. Saying you wanted to say.
Oh yeah, you already know. Simply because one of the things I love about being on here with all of you is the language that we use, right? And we tap into strategy, right? I'm pretty sure my parents didn't wake me up and say, "Hey, you know what? Let's talk about the strategy of your feelings today," right? And it's a word that it's a performance word, right? And it's, again, going back to naming what happened, right? Naming your part of the recovery, and not really looking at it so much as a strategy, right? And I get the language, right? And this is where the shared language comes in. I think this is where the cognitive meets the heart, right? I call it the hut, right? It's your heart and your gut at the same time, but like you're having to pull your brain in there and understanding when we interchange those words and say, oh, it's a strategy to healing or a strategy to figuring this out, it sounds performative sometimes, right? And we tap into that, and then what happens is we hear strategy and we go back to cognitive, and it's like and then we step back out of our body again.
But isn't that interplay part of how you test it? Isn't that the teeter-totter, if you will, of how you get there?
Absolutely. But what I've realized this morning when we were talking in book club, we were taught back in the day, because I'm like 99 and, Jamie's 108. So back in the day, we were taught, stop crying, get over it, just do this, do what I say. I don't know what you're crying for, right? But we weren't taught to, let's talk about why you're crying. Let's talk about why you're upset. Let's talk about, and my sister does a really great job of this. She'll say, were you emotionally hurt or were you physically hurt? And that's something even we can take in to go ask ourselves, am I physically hurt or am I emotionally hurt? Right. And then the hardest part right now is naming that emotion, because again, back in 1900s, we were not taught about emotions. And so that's what makes it uncomfortable because if I say, someone walks up to me and says, hey, Sang, how are you? I feel really defeated today. Do you know how uncomfortable people become if they're not able to handle that? And then they'll go sympathy. Oh, well, that sucks for you.
Well, again, one of the things that you're talking about in recovery is finding out what that safety is, getting reoriented to how you are moving through space, and recognize that whenever you reclaim your safe space for yourself, you are then recalibrating with everyone else that you come into contact with, because you are a different person after you transform if you've truly embodied that. And so you move, new thresholds with people get established, right? Because you now know what is safe for you, right? So, Stacey, while we were talking about that sort of dance between the body and the brain, wherever you want to put it, did you have some thoughts you wanted to add?
Well, I love the recalibrate, how you recalibrate with everybody that you've been with. It reminds me of the descriptor of, when you throw a pebble in a pond, the pond has to change.
Yes.
And you being different, your new integration, your new reemergence, if you will, is that pebble in the pond, and everybody around you has to change to go with it, whether they like it or not. And frequently they don't like it. But then the pond eventually stabilizes when you've recalibrated.
Right. And if you're not careful, you can get back into, if you're not prepared for that recalibration, you're going to think something else is going wrong again. Right.
So or that something's wrong with you.
Right.
Yep. You can get into that one and really.
I love it here.
Yeah.
Well, Ray, was there something that emerged for you?
Yeah, I think everyone's touched on some really interesting ideas and connections. And I think one of the things that Sang has always stressed is the language we use, and asking, what do you mean when you use that word, or what are you getting at? And I think what's happening in conversations is we're changing the nature of what happened before to what's happening now and likely in the future, as Stacey mentioned, is the ripples in the ponds are changing the dynamic. The fact that Sang has brought up a particular how do you feel in, let's say, in another discussion, allows other people to start opening up and to learning that it's okay to even ask a question. And to explore that question. I think, and that's kind of what really excites me, is the fact that we can explore this together and then co-create the meaning of the whole experience like each one of you has contributed to that. So now it's like, okay, now I can start to learn to read my body, or to understand, listen to it, as Ollie said, and Stacey and Sang, and you, Jamie. So I think that's the value of having deeper discussions that allow more to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Ollie, do you want to speak to what you just put in the chat, that it's important?
Yes, exactly. Because we are all different, 8.3 billion brains. And so it means that our experience is unique to ourselves. And our words are unique. We try to also capture, but what is black, what is gray, what is white? Maybe there are multiple meanings. There are also perception. So I think it's really important to let people express, being in a curious state and listening, and trying to remove our shoes and dancing in their space rather than to say what you said doesn't make sense. But it's about listening. If only our great leaders were listening, what a peaceful world, what it could be. So that's my share. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great.
That's amazing.
That what you're speaking to is that recovery teaches you to trust your body signals instead of overriding whatever the social expectations are, right? And sometimes that means smaller circles, different boundaries, and you're testing those things out as you go. You're saying no to things that you used to tolerate. And the challenge when you're walking on all this is that your awareness now. I remember this woman was sharing, and it was in a corporate environment, and she says, I now look, whenever I'm in a situation, I look, if I'm beginning to feel angry and frustrated in a situation, I know that's not the right environment for me. And I know all of us know people who are in their anger and in frustration 24/7 all the time. They can no longer get back to that point, where, oh yeah, you seriously saying yes, no, you don't know anyone who's in their anger and frustration 24/7?
Yeah, sometimes, and it's such a fascinating place to be in, because I want to take you through that piece too, right? When they're in anger and that frustration, a lot of times again, now turning cognitive piece, now that we've talked about our body, then it becomes, we have our negative self-talk, which we've talked about before, right? Then we start self-blaming ourselves. We were responsible for it. How did we do it? How did we screw this up? Right? We have a different type of grieving for ourselves, and we take it all in. We're like, oh, let me just take on everything that they're not giving me and self-soothe, right? And I say it like that because we don't know how to self-soothe safely. And what I mean by that is, again, we were just taught to get over it, F your feelings, nobody cares, deal with it yourself. And we've just been stuck there because sometimes we shut down. Sometimes I know Ali talked about it before. There's the things where we may harm ourselves, or we may harm others, or we start, have you ever talked to somebody and all of a sudden you're just like, hey, da 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 da. And like you said, they just start lashing out of nowhere. You're like, whoa.
Well, right. And that numbing, that the thing that happens in self-harm, is that contrast, right? From things have been so stimulating, right? And that you just need to do something to numb, whatever that is, something that sort of take you away. And, that recalibration, that recognition is, it can take many different paths. And so there is a purpose to anger. There is a purpose to frustration, but when it becomes the constant state, right? That's where I think that other part of it hasn't been invited yet, saying, right, which is the release, and we, there's a great comic by the name of Fran Lebowitz who says, spilling your guts is sometimes just as attractive as it sounds. But on some level, there is that there is that purging that needs to happen. There is that way of getting that energy out, and that's what I thought was so beautiful about what this woman was saying. Wait a second. Once I've had this recognition, once I've had this awareness of what's going on, I look at anger and frustration as red flags. Now, again, that's her own self-determination, right? But that journey again that we keep talking about the recovery after harm begins with that recognition and then kind of moving forward. Anyone? Does that cause anyone to respond?
I'm responding all the time.
I think that what I appreciated what you said is the release. So you've got the recognition of the feeling cognitively, You've got the recognition of the feeling. And this is what I love about voicing questions people. I've watched her do this in person, is the recognition of the feeling in your brain, recognition of the feeling in your body, recognition of the feeling overall, and then it's the release of the feeling in each of those places. And that none of those things are things that we have been socialized to, because we've been socialized to stuff.
Right. I love this comment.
Stuffing is what, in fact, what causes most of our, biological and brain.
This comment, this comment in the chat really builds from that, right? That somehow that anger is a great indicator, but it's not your only communicator. And when you learn that you have those other avenues available to you, what wonderful things emerge for you. But you have to when your anger has been stifled, it needs to get out. But it's not your only way of expressing, right? Or anyone, don't mean to.
I was going to do a mom brag. That's my daughter. And so, hello, toot toot. But hearing her say that, right, me shows that I've been having conversations, but I've also, I don't take all the credit, right? Because she has choices to make, right? She has surrounded herself by people, and that's what I want to go into next, is you surround yourself by people who are able to have those types of conversations, who share that with you. I don't recall anybody ever sharing any of that type of conversation with me, right? To say anger is this or anger is that. And allowing, I know one of the things I did my best is allow my kids to go through whatever they were going through, even though I could see the end result, because it's their lived experience.
Right.
You allowed them to learn? What?
I know, right? It's crazy, because we want to fix it as parents, for sure. But and as a parent and as a person, I can't make their pain go away. No. Right? I can't package it in a way, but helping them process and name those feelings. And again, like we talked about, I think last week and a few weeks, is that we automatically go to a feeling, but that's typically not the actual feeling that we have.
Right. And what if we could create a space where we could allow others to be supported while they're recalibrating, right? While they're getting that because that's how resilience takes root. Right, is because there's someone there to listen and guide us as we're recalibrating. It's real easy to talk about our lived experience, and if we don't have that sort of guidance leadership or that presence of, I don't want to say correct parenting, but you know what I mean, that idea that there's somebody there witnessing what we're going through, to be that compassionate presence. That's when resilience kicks in.
Right. And that part too, the resilience piece is such a big word, right? And it's taking that in and saying how we get to define it. And I always say this, I get to be here. I get to have this conversation with all of you. I get to decide what my journey looks like. I get to decide my feelings, and I get to decide if I'm going to share them. And I think one of the things, especially is listening to Angel, is you have to know who in your circle can support what you're going through, right? Because not everybody can be in that space, and not everybody is for everyone to walk you through that. And knowing who you need to go to, again, goes back to self, to say, okay, this is who I need to talk to, because I know this is how they show up. And there's a distinction. And if anything, I feel like I've learned, such a big word is distinction, that learning what the difference is between people who can show up for you in the capacity that you need, but you also need to know what is it that you need. Because I know there are certain people, I'm like, if I'm going through something, I'm like, I'm not talking to them. Because I even had a conversation not so long ago, and I was like, I can't talk to you about this anymore. Like, I cannot talk to you about it. And he was like, what do you mean you can't talk to me about it anymore? And I was like, dude, I can't talk to you about it. Like, you're literally at an octave 12 and I need you at a 5. And he's like, well, that's your problem, not mine. Right. And I was like, bro, I'm just telling you what I need, and you're listening, and it's okay. I just know you're not the person to talk to.
There was a question saying that was in the chat a while back, and it dovetails nicely with what you're saying. And I think that this is maybe an area that we could kind of take a look at, which is that people in general don't really like it when you make big changes for yourself, especially if it affects them. And what you were talking about was one of those things where, developing a technique or a practice that supports you when you've recalibrated and you're in the presence of people who would in the past have undone you. But you feel like you need to prepare yourself now when you make big changes, right? So are there do you guys have any thoughts about the ways in which we can prepare ourselves after we've been through this kind of experience of recognizing, gosh, I don't want to go through that experience again. What are some ways that we might be able to help ourselves and toss out some good ideas?
I think it goes along also with what Sang was just talking about of what was it? You said, was it distinction?
Yes, distinction.
Distinction. Yeah. The other word I thought about was discernment.
Absolutely.
Is that, is make the distinction, but then also that discernment of who is going to support me through this change in the way I need right now. It's not anything against another person who can't support you. They're just not in a place to be able to support you at that moment in time in that situation. So using your discernment of who you speak to and who you don't. And then, to what the comment about that of preparing yourself before you make a change. I think we prepare ourselves for other people's reactions, but we can't fully prepare them because they're on their journey with their learnings. Like Dolly was talking about 8.3 billion people. There's literally no way we can prepare the rest of the world for our change.
And
yeah, go ahead, Thing.
Me as a word junkie, I'm going to go back to the difference between distinction and discernment, just so everyone understands, right? Because a lot of times we can use words and we interchange them, right?
Yeah, these aren't interchangeable.
Right, they're not interchangeable. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that, because distinction is noticing or naming the difference, right? The difference between good or bad, the difference between black and yellow, whatever, right? Discernment is now using your lived wisdom, your lived experience to understand what something really is for you and what to do about it for yourself.
Right. Right. And if we're talking about embodied cognition, which is what that discernment really is, a term that Ray and I have been tossing around a lot, and is that again, going back to that embodied cognition, right? Because you only get to know what that's like when you exercise that muscle.
Yeah.
And these are new muscles for a lot of people to exercise. The idea when you say to somebody, well, you have to discern, right? That is something that you gain experience on. Ray, did you want to add more to that?
Well, I think threading all this together is really important, because I think we've also used the term building the bridge as we cross it. And that's essentially the experience. We're creating new ways of communicating and collaborating with each other. So we're figuring out, okay, what do I pay attention to? What does it mean when I do this, etc. A lot of the group conversations I've been in on recently are actually starting to come to that realization that a shift is required, just like you saying, and Stacy and Ollie have said, like to create those spaces, as you mentioned, Jamie, and to have these conversations. And just building on what Sang said, when I was growing up, those spaces didn't exist either.
Right.
And now that they're here, back to you, Jamie, is building that muscle is and Ollie, listening, and then trying to understand, and then to change the way we are a little bit, and then seeing what that effect has on others.
Yeah.
And responding to whatever they're going to do about it.
Yeah. No. Right. And one of the things that Ollie has a very developed muscle about, and I say this with a deep gratitude and respect, is the ability to be present and also express verbally and through chat at the same time. I think that that's a really, really great skill be able to, I know you've been communicating in the chat with people and expressing your thoughts. And I want you to know that we've been, the idea there's like multitasking. We use that term in terms of what the body's, doing, but there's actually this multi-processing that happens, right? When you're listening and it triggers things out and you're able to sort of communicate it to kind of get that signal. Some of us nod, but I so appreciate whenever Ollie is in a space, right? That there is this way that the communication flows. For me, when I really know if I need to understand something, those of you who know me well, I keep note cards with me because I need to be able to write it out, and Ollie, you have a very finely developed muscle to be able to do that. That's sort of how it is really important that as you're learning new concepts for yourself, that you find a way in which you can kind of get that to cross over in the brain from, just a random thought to something that you actually then either type or you write longhand, because it's part of that integration process of thoughts. So thank you for that, Ollie.
Yes. And I want to share something about healing and distinction. And I want to say healing, but I want to say recovery, right? Recovery. Healing is a word, I feel like, also another word that is so now broadly overused that now we must find words to really tap into deeper meaning, right? So recovery is great because what does that look like, right? And so the distinction, recovery is internal for self, right? It's whatever process, whatever slow, it could be days, it could be weeks, it could be months, it could be years, right? And it's rooted in your truth. And it's processing the wound of where that came from, where the harm came from, right? And we talked about this last week. And then the discernment of that recovery is knowing whether or not your growth that you're having is genuinely being integrated, and whether you're doing or whether you're appearing to be evolved to avoid feeling messy, or to avoid being seen as messy, or to avoid being seen as unhealed. And I say it like that because, again, we've taken the word healing and just
yeah. Well, so how do you recognize the difference between healing and just managing?
Well, you feel it's such a hard thing to explain that, because it's in your body, right? And you can tell when you're having a conversation with somebody. I know for myself, I can only speak for myself, right? When I'm having a conversation with myself and I can feel my body shifting, and I know some of you may have known, and it was funny when you mentioned earlier about sometimes we don't listen to our body, Ollie. Clearly I didn't listen, but I also did listen. And that was the interesting part for me, is when you're having a conversation about whatever it is that you're recovering from, and you will feel the conversation and the energy of the words of somebody else and go, this doesn't feel good. And how many times do you sit there and go, this doesn't feel good, but you still sit there? Because then the question becomes not even it's like, is there something in you now that's preventing you from speaking up to say, hey, you know what? I can't have this conversation with you right now because it's not feeling good for me. Mm-hmm. And I will say again, mom brag, my daughter's really great at that. And being able to ask for that, right? Being able to say, I don't need that from you right now. This is what I need. And if you can't give that to me, I don't want to have this conversation.
Right.
But people will get so offended and get so pissed off when you say that, when you tell them what you need. And they're like, well, pick you then, and it's like, but they're telling you what you need. And it's about respecting their
right. And again, you keep coming back to that whole idea of recognizing that once you've recalibrated after harm, right, that there's this new threshold for yourself. And that part of this is testing out what those thresholds are like in the relationships that you've had. I can already see that the subject that's emerging for next week is we want to talk about this concept of thresholds, because it's really important as you're going through. Did anyone else, before we leap on in the wonderful way that this Pinta is doing this morning, to talk a little bit about that, even from your own personal experience, what the difference between healing and managing was like for you? Does anything come out from that? Everyone mastered that brilliantly.
I have not. But
Stacey, you were starting to say.
No, I'm still thinking back in Sang's comment about how people are when you tell them what you need, and I think that one's I'm still savoring on that.
Yeah, it's
well,
your. Go ahead, Ollie. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about being able to listen to our body, to acknowledge our body reaction, how we are feeling, to be able to express it to the other person, and to be able to manage the NVC, the nonviolent communication, that we are able to express in an authority emotional place, while we can also listen to others' needs. Because when there is a conflict, it means that we have our own needs and others are their own needs. And at some point, it takes just one of the two or one of the group that is intelligent to not fight in a battle, to go able to escalate, de-escalate. Because if we are all having our own needs and we are fighting for that without listening to others, then it's escalation. And it needs one to not embark in that, to calm down and to say, okay, my needs are da 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 da. Your needs are da 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 da. How could we arrange so that both our needs are met?
Right. You absolutely stop playing the game. In other words, you can't rise above it anymore. You can't keep doing this, stacking on, adding on. You have to pull yourself out of that, the geometry of that whole situation, literally.
Yes. And I'm going to go into again. I love that we have distinction and discernment. It's such a great two words that are used a lot in vulnerability sharing versus oversharing, right? Vulnerability is the honest sharing that is from your core. Like you're like, I'm sharing with intention, I'm sharing with self-awareness, right? And then the distinction of oversharing is when we have unprocessed emotional vomit, is what I'm going to call it, right? Without the safety or even asking the person, hey, because you know what you're about to vomit onto someone. And I think there is a sense of, I know I have a sense of my own responsibility to say, hey, I want to share something. Do you have capacity for this? Because if you don't, it's okay. And I think asking, because sometimes we just want to talk about something, but that person may not even have the capacity to have a conversation with you right now. And then going into the discernment of it is sensing again in your body. A discernment, I feel like, is a lot in your body, right? The distinction is mental, like, am I doing this? Am I doing this? And the discernment piece is whether or not I'm opening up to you and sharing in a grounded space, or am I sharing with you from the place of pain and harm that I've received?
Yeah, Stacey.
And saying, I think that's I love that you went the mind and body thing there. That one, now you've got my brain blown up again. The other piece of it, though, I think is also that we're back to, we're not socialized to it, and so we're not socialized to realize what that vulnerable sharing is versus the oversharing. And if we're not socialized to it, we don't know what we don't know. And when we don't know what we don't know, we can inadvertently overshare without realizing it. And it's not even that we don't know what we don't know. We might not be in tune with realizing that that's what it is at the moment. And if we're not in tune with it and we overshare without asking, it might be because we don't realize it ourselves. And then I think there comes a time of having grace with ourselves and with each other about where we're at in the process.
Yeah.
Right.
Ray, I see you kind of chiming in on that.
Yeah, I love the idea that it's this continual back and forth between whoever we're working with or talking with or engaging with is to understand what are they getting, what are they not getting, what are they feeling, what are they not feeling, and to sort of pause and look at, well, discern Is it appropriate? Do they get it? And back to saying, as far as to ask those questions, to sort of gauge and to basically follow the pathway, the flow of what's happening. Because I think when we lose track of that, then we likely overshare or overstep by not understanding what's going on with the other person.
And all of you are speaking to that whole idea of, again, looking out into the field of possibilities, being present in what's happening around you, and recognizing that recalibration, that awareness that you've had from the harm, has to be applied in practice in the moment. That it's not, I get to swear in this space because it's, it's not just simply that new age bullshit that simply says change your mind, change your life. And I think that idea, that concept, that somehow it's just simply, Stacey, if you just thought differently about this, things would be different. Or Ray, that's just what you think. If you could think somewhere else, and we begin to condition ourselves that if we can just change the thought, that's magically going to happen. But it isn't until you walk that embodiment, right? And you road test it, if you will, right? In those situations, and recognize that, just like you said, saying some people are not going to be prepared for it. And you have to then use your awareness that they may not have the capacity for that. And that is that master class in recognizing that you may very well be triggered in a moment. But you know what? I have been in this experience before. And if I unload too much in this space, it's going to be bad for you and it's going to be bad for me.
Oh yeah, I have plenty of stories about that. But
Well,
go ahead, Stacey.
I also like the fact that you say that masterclass, Jamie Rich, because I think we expect ourselves to, like, once we've learned the lesson, we're going to apply it everywhere and we're going to be perfect with it. Ain't no shit. It's called practice for a reason. That we and that even though we know it and even though we practice it, there are times and there are moments where we're allowed to fall on our butt. We can and do, especially when we're around people that we're comfortable with, end up falling, on our backsides because we're comfortable, and we may overshare at a moment when we're not, when we wouldn't normally, because we're comfortable with the people we're with. And even though we might not have discerned and asked them, are they okay with it? It may be because we're that comfortable with them and we know that this person is going to, have my back too.
Yeah.
I love it when a conversation like that, Stacey, gets into some people going, that again, that noise is really important cognitively, because it's not just because there's like that, of stuff, but when it's really sunk from your head to your body, it's like, And I look for those body signals from other people, because, oftentimes you'll share something with people and they're still up there. Yeah, I'm up here with it. And then there's that, when it kind of all the way goes and integrates. So thank you for the body things that are being expressed.
My absolute pleasure.
Let's see. I also wanted to explain that Ollie was with us for just a limited amount of time this morning, but his presence is always appreciated, as is all of the people who have been participating through the chat this morning. And I want to make sure, as we're mindful, as we're getting to the top of the hour here, we do this every Sunday. Because of the wonderful Breakthrough Show Network that allows us to have this conversation where we talk about ideas that are emerging around the work and personal transformation and the way in which we're sort of operating in the world right now. If you have some ideas for us to discuss, or if you'd like to join us in the roundtable, this is a very open conversation that we like to have, because we speak to what's emerging. You can connect with us through RiseandShineSundays.com, and you can join us in the roundtable. And part of what we're doing in this space is that we're hoping to be evolving to another space that has ripples and waves of its own that will allow people to be able to move in and out of the discussion as we go. So I really appreciate that all of you are speaking so candidly from your experiences as well, because that's part of what it takes. That, like I said, and I'm going to use your name again, Ray. We're not doing the Ray Gio School of Transformation where
Why
everything's
not? Why not?
That's right. Well, I'm out of here. Was there more that anyone else wanted to add as we're beginning to wrap things up? Observations about what it takes to recover from harm, things we might be able to leave as stepping stones for people.
Yeah, of course. Always. I'm always going to be the first one to talk, only probably because I was the last one to talk in high school and all the things, because I wasn't allowed to talk and people didn't want to hear my voice. So I learned to sit at the front of the room, and I learned to talk first. Is one of the things I want to wrap my segment up in terms of we're taught to be sympathetic to other people, but we are so brutal with ourselves. So when things happen, right? We understand that pain matters and we get it, but we take it all in, and we suddenly become the most harshest person to ourselves. And I always tell people, go in the mirror and start saying those things. Would you say those things to yourself? Would you say those things to your friend? If your friend came to you with the same problem you did and you said, you know what, you're really stupid. How could you be so stupid? Like, would you say that to your friend? Like, and I know my girl's not in the chat. I don't think she is. I don't know, but she's our own best friend. Like, learn how to become your own best friend, right? And understand that we say some of the harshest things to ourselves, and trust is such a deeply rooted question. And I'm going to leave people with a question: is when was the first time that you ever were betrayed? Right? When was the first time? Take yourself way back, because just like I like to go back and give the definition of words, because we need to understand and have that shared vocabulary, which is what I was talking about last week, is when we get to the root, the definition of where did this wound, where did this harm, how did this become so astronomically huge in my space right now as I'm 99 years old, right? Where did it come from? Where did it start? Because it started and then it just kept being fed.
Yeah.
And then it just kept growing. And then we continued to talk about ourselves so bad, right? And what I've learned to do, and I tell people all the time, I live a ridiculously amazing life. When I tell y'all some of the stories, though, y'all be like, what? Like, how did you, what? How? But I do, because I look at every situation, and I've thanked the people who have violated me in whatever manner. I haven't thanked them to their face, because they don't want to see me in my face, as we know. But but everything is a learned experience in that space. Right. And it's about finding that gratitude and being tender with yourself, and not abandoning yourself in the process.
Correct. And that gratitude stems from that resilience, and that resilience grows from you being able to self-verify from your lived experience to be able to gain from that. I saw your finger go up, Stacey. Was there something you wanted to?
Oh, well, Sang got the psychic messages from across town that said, that have grace with yourself. That's one of the things that I think, and it reminded me of a phrase that someone taught me quite some time ago, is in supporting others. If I heard Sang saying things to herself that I thought where she was, downing on herself, it'd be like, hey, don't treat my friend Sang like that.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And like reminding us to, that I would be reminding her that she is worth that, and I love that, stand in the mirror and do that. The other thing that you brought to my mind is when you're going back to that first time you were betrayed, that literally and this is, because me, I'm going to go into like, how did that happen? What was it that happened at that moment? At a moment in time, words are not coming to me, but they do mean something. Limiting beliefs about ourselves happen at a decisive moment in time. And then they replay over and over and over again until we break that cycle and make a change. And it's not the woo-woo-y, oh, we'll just change your mind and change it. But like Jamie Rich, you called it BS. That's BS. it's not like that. You don't just change your mind. You do have to go through a process to do it, but that moment in time that you might not even remember because it happened before you were whatever years old,
Mhm.
caused to have a program in your mind that you've run your entire life. And it's not doesn't mean that you are a faulty being. Doesn't
Right.
mean that something's wrong with you as a human.
You just
And so have the having grace with yourself and forgiveness with self
Yep.
is if forgiveness is a form of release as it is, but
Right. It is.
you know,
These are a lot of the things of what it takes to recover after harm. Ray, was there anything else you wanted to toss in as we were reading?
No, just a last thought is that it's an expression that Jamie and I have been playing around with, and has a deeper meaning. But in essence, by rounding someone else's sphere, we in turn are rounded by the experience. So it's essentially what you said, saying, and Stacy and Ollie and Jamie, is that we're opening the door for that experience to get rid of all the other experiences that have shaped or dented our spheres or ourselves. And by rounding, like a conversation like today is a gift to everyone who participates because we're rounding our spheres.
Right. Beautifully said. I the only thing I can add to that is that, some helpful terminology that emerged from today was, of course, that difference between the distinction and the discernment of something, and the idea of that embodied cognition as you go through it, and allowing yourself to really understand what these new thresholds are as you have your own recalibrated setting in terms of interacting with people. So those are part of the beauty of what emerges every Sunday here on Rise and Shine Sundays. We are grateful for your participation in the dialogue, and we will wait to see what emerges next week. Again, we welcome your suggestions. Please get in contact with us through the website of RiseandShineSundays.com. Coming up next on the Breakthrough Show Network is Spirit Sessions at 12 Eastern. I am grateful for the Pinta that was here. We were appreciative of everyone who participated in today's energy, and we will welcome you back next week. In the meantime, continue living that experiment that is your life and looking to see what emerges. And we think, and we will leave you with that love. So thank you all.